The human mind does not evaluate experiences by their absolute quality. It evaluates them by contrast. When something happens for the first time, the brain treats it as informationally rich. Attention sharpens. Sensory perception intensifies. Memory formation accelerates. This heightened response is not a sign that the experience is objectively better than others. It is a sign that the brain has not yet learned how to predict it. Novelty forces awareness. A first trip to a new place feels immersive because every detail demands processing. A first emotional connection feels overwhelming because the outcome is uncertain. A first achievement feels powerful because it disrupts the internal narrative of who we believe we are. But as soon as prediction becomes possible, intensity declines. The experience does not deteriorate. The mind adapts. This adaptation is not a failure of appreciation. It is a survival mechanism, a nervous system that reacted with full intensity to every repeated stimulus would quickly collapse under sensory overload. So the brain learns to conserve energy. It lowers the emotional volume. And this is where confusion begins. People interpret fading intensity as a loss of value. They assume something has gone wrong, either with the experience or with themselves. In reality, nothing has failed. The brain has simply recalibrated its baseline. What once stood out now blends in. This is why people chase firsts. Not because firsts are superior, but because they temporarily bypass adaptation. The desire for novelty is not a desire for pleasure. It is a desire for contrast. Psychology and economics describe the same phenomenon using different language. Economists call it diminishing marginal utility. Psychologists observe it as emotional saturation. The principle is simple but uncomfortable. Each additional unit of the same experience produces less impact than the previous one. The first complement alters self-perception. The second reinforces it. The third stabilizes it. The 10th barely registers. The words have not changed. The listener has. The human mind is built to normalize patterns. Repetition reduces informational value. When nothing new is being learned, the brain disengages. This explains why abundance so often fails to produce happiness. Pleasure has an upper limit. Beyond that point, additional input does not increase satisfaction. It flattens it. This emotional ceiling applies everywhere. In consumption, it explains why more possessions do not create lasting fulfillment. In work, it explains why constant incentives lose motivational power. In relationships, it explains why excessive reassurance weakens emotional impact. The problem is not that people want too much. The problem is that they misunderstand how value is generated. Value does not accumulate linearly. It decays. One of the most damaging misunderstandings in human relationships is a belief that effort is always visible. People assume that if they give more, care will be recognized. If they explain more, understanding will increase. If they show up more often, connection will deepen. Psychologically, the opposite often happens. Effort only has meaning when it contrasts with absence. When effort becomes constant, it loses informational value. It no longer signals intention. It signals expectation. The mind stops registering it as a choice. This is why children raised on constant praise struggle with motivation. Praise becomes background noise rather than feedback. This is why unlimited availability in relationships reduces desire. Presence loses its meaning when it is guaranteed. Human perception depends on difference. What is rare feels chosen. What is constant feels assumed. What is assumed becomes invisible. This does not mean effort is unimportant. It means timing matters more than volume. Meaning emerges not from repetition, but from restraint. Not all value comes from usefulness. Some value exists entirely in the social imagination. This is where the Veblen effect operates. Luxury goods are not designed to maximize efficiency. They are designed to signal status. Their high price does not reduce demand. It creates it, because price becomes meaning. A high cost communicates scarcity. Scarcity communicates exclusivity. Exclusivity communicates social position. The object itself becomes secondary. What matters is what the object says. Lowering the price destroys the signal. Demand collapses not because the product is worse, but because its meaning has changed. This reveals something fundamental about human psychology. Much of our behavior is symbolic. We are not only consumers of function, we are communicators of identity. The deepest lesson of diminishing utility is restraint, not moral restraint, not self-denial, but cognitive restraint. Psychological maturity involves knowing when additional effort will no longer increase value. It involves recognizing the point where escalation turns into erosion. More tension can reduce desire. More pressure can destroy motivation. More reassurance can weaken trust. This is not intuitive. It contradicts cultural narratives that glorify intensity and constant output. But the human nervous system does not reward excess. It rewards contrast. Silence gives meaning to speech. Distance restores presence. Limitation preserves impact. Knowing when to stop is not failure. It is intelligence. Because what is space is felt. What is limited is valued. And what is chosen remains meaningful.